Okay,
Here we are.
and then Brian, do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, that would probably be great.
Okay.
I think, Ryan, and maybe you already saw this. I think, what are we, Peach?
We are Peach.
We are at the, I think, Ryan, at the bottom, starting with priority 5, if I'm not mistaken.
Got it. Okie doke.
Yeah.
Up in 5. There we go.
Does everyone, I'm just wondering, it's good to see you, Diana. Good to see you, Janine. Hey, Adrian. Does everybody know each other, or do we want to just do some, let's do a quick introduction round here, just so people can be familiar. I'm Brian, YDD director. It's a pleasure to be a part of the group. Oh, good. Lupe's joining us, another guest. Lupe, we're just doing introductions. I'm Brian Detman, Youth Development Division Director. I will kick it to Adrian.
Yes, hi, I'm Adrian Livingston. I'm the Director of Anti-Sex Trafficking Initiatives with World Venture, and happy to be here.
Ryan Shands, I'm the staff who's going to be taking the notes today and compliance monitor for Title II with the YDD.
I'm Janine Hartley, one of the council members.
Thanks, Janine. Adrian and Janine are both council members. Hey, Diana, do you want to go next?
I was, yeah. Hey there. Hey, Janine. This is Diana Rojas, and I am a youth council member.
And Lupe.
Yes. Yeah, I'm stepping in for within my organization, which is for the Teaching Teens for Tomorrow program within the Boys and Girls Club. Yeah, my name's Lupe Garcia.
Welcome. We appreciate you being here. All right. I don't know, Ryan, we so appreciate. We are doing breakout. So I can close my mouth, but I'm just trying to keep us moving. We should spend some time actually looking, and I don't know, do people have access to Google Docs? Like, would it be helpful to send the link? I'm cool with anybody and everybody seeing it. We may have a little work to do to like make sure you have permission. Ryan, I'm going to just drop it in the chat.
Absolutely, you could try it. Now, the only thing is that if people don't have immediate access, Melissa is probably going to get some emails with people requesting it. So if you don't get to see it right away, we'll just maybe use the screen, and then hopefully you'll get access to it so we can kind of open it up.
Yeah, you're exactly. Okay, I'm putting it in. I'm assuming y'all will see this. Yeah, and if I'll text Melissa too to see if people can you do even like a read only would still work.
Yeah.
Right, because Ryan's going to take notes.
Taking the notes. Yep.
I see Diana. I'm getting the notices.
Okay.
Ryan. So looks like I can let people in. Okay, I'm gonna.
So the idea here, Brian, is that basically we're all going to be reading the strategies and actions here, and then rating them in terms of our group's priority within here. Well, no, wait, we're Peach, not Pear, right?
Yeah, you're Peach. So you're going to copy and paste them over, put them in priority order, or put multiple peaches by them to say that's important. Whatever. Okay, Diana, I got. Lupe, you're next. Yeah, so Ryan, however folks want to organize is.
Yeah, how about if I just start reading some of them off? You know, is that okay? Because while we're waiting for the document to open up, okay. So here on the strategies, we have strengthen council's sense of its purpose and role and sustain its collective wisdom and knowledge. The actions through this are to clarify the YDC role, that vis-a-vis grant making and other work, or to develop onboarding orientation roadmap for council members, which would include developing description one-pagers on the YDC's role, and work with Alyssa and Lindsay on lessons learned. Then determine YDC position on grantee and non-grantee recruitment and role on YDC. So that's one strategy with a list of actions underneath it. The second one is intentional and nimble YDC, YDD committee structure aligned with strategic plan as well as emergent opportunities and challenges. The actions for those are to examine existing structure or determine whether to add data, equity through policy, reduce subcommittees, and what should be an ad hoc opportunist, or assess the YDC committees and make sure that there is a committee structure in the strategic plan, or review and refine bylaws to reflect any changes. There's quite a bit of option here to really kind of select whatever priority you choose. Next strategy is nothing about youth without youth. Action, recruit new youth members, lived experience and under 28 to the YDC and youth committee while meeting federal state advisory group minimum. Consider Ezekiel Vasquez, former OIA youth for the YDC as a youth member. One of the discussions born out of the groups yesterday was having, with Diana, was having more youth that are presently involved in the justice system and even confinement, having a place at the table as a youth member, potentially. Another strategy is equitable, inclusive, diverse, and anti-racist YDD-YDC through actions of developing and implementing a YDC-YDD equity plan, or to consider creating an equity committee as part of the YDC subcommittee structure examination. And then the last strategy is continuously improve the YDC-YDD grant making through actions of clarifying and communicate YDC role vis-a-vis grant making, and including convening a smaller group of council staff to look at existing statute and rules and consider revisions, or to review real and potential conflicts of interest of YDC member grant applicants and develop protocols to mitigate when needed, or annual ethics training. What are important to you guys?
Does Janine, Adrian, Diana, or do y'all have now, can you see it now? Jaime,
Okay.
I put in the chat, I may need to put it in again, a Google Doc.
Okay.
That you can access. You may need to request access, Jaime. Once you see that, click that link, and I'm happy to give you access so that you all can be looking at what Ryan and I have. There he goes. Okay, I see you. I will jump in here and. Well, and Ryan, in group, I would just say the kind of first question, if I'm not mistaken, is like, what is missing? What else would you add?
Yeah.
Like, those are the things from conversations over the last couple of days, 3 or whatever strategies, and several related actions. I wouldn't think pulling them out from each other might be challenging, but or maybe there are 4 strategies. But is there something missing in the context of this overall strategy?
That makes sense. Okay.
Or overall priority, sorry.
Can I add, is it okay, Brian, if I add one thing, a thought, just for the council's consideration?
Throw it out. Well, I mean, this is a small group. Yeah, throw it out for this group to think through. One of the things
mentioned yesterday, which it's kind of mentioned in here a little bit, is some council members wanted to know if they had questions and they wanted to learn more about a particular topic of the YDC or the YDD's work, how would they find that out? Is there a path forward or an avenue for engaging with staff on the YDD, to receiving that information? Are there briefs that we can put out. And that's something that I mean, there's here in terms of, what the YDC's role is and lessons learned, but I thought maybe that might be one we could potentially add somewhere.
Yeah, I heard that need, Ryan, that strikes me as I don't know. Well, actually, I don't want what council members. There's like a communication priority somewhere earlier, and or I think you were also just talking about that seemed like a question that came up very specific to the retreat. Like, hey, I want to follow up to the presentation Bill gave, and I'm not. I think capturing that as a action like makes sense. Just put it at the bottom, but as where I put it, I think we should not lose that, but I wonder what other people on the call think.
Yeah, I like that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I like that idea. In fact, I think under the action of develop onboarding or orientation roadmap for council members, I could see it fitting in there because it's orienting us. And then if we have questions, who do we go to? How do we connect with staff, et cetera? So as a newbie, I do like that.
When I was thinking and when questioning or potentially adding on some sort of documentation of the journey we're taking, I know the journey has been twisty and turny over time, and I feel like we're getting stable and more, and so I don't know how far back we go, but some sort of demonstration or evaluation of our progress that we're making within our structure, just in general.
Janine, I feel like I want to know more.
I'm
not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Totally
and then maybe it's just my own. For the variety of projects I'm working on, I'm in evaluation land. But just knowing, just clarity on. Oftentimes, I'm thinking we've been in conversations or been in council meetings where like, oh, well, we've discussed this in the past, and so the collective knowledge I think is getting more ingrained in the culture of our council, but because there's been longevity and continuity, both in terms of membership, staff, and leadership. And so is there a way that we're being intentional for the inevitable shifts of council membership and staff and leadership that will occur that we can be like, oh, we've already had this discussion, this is what we've decided and we're moving in this direction? But that I recognize sounds really nuancy and really onerous and real big pain in the butt. So maybe it's, is it like a collective file system? I don't know. It's just a thought that came up.
List of success.
Does the sort of orientation and training that is, which I've heard multiple council members, like that is like not just about here's the manual, but like actually has some way of telling the story of the journey. Like you can't just be pieces of paper. I mean, it can be pieces of paper, but that's what I'm hearing you say, Janine.
Yeah, and I think that would be a great way to do it, is to tell our story. And as you were saying that, I was thinking too, how many times I have to tell people that I'm working with an ODE about YDD work. And so like documenting our story is not only valuable for us and our identity as a group, but also has the potential to have legs with folks who are like, what does that group do again?
Yeah. Hey, Ryan, you want to put whatever notes you're grabbing in the pair, what peach section, which I think is a little higher.
I'll put it in there. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so
which is fine. You're close. I would just go a little higher because you're now in pair, and the pair people. Oh my!
I got it. It's all right. We'll recover. Hold on.
I would just say, Janine, to your comments, it kind of lighted a light bulb. Is we don't want to be the best kept secret, right?
Right.
Both in this and in our house, but in community. And how are we how are we promoting ourselves within our house, right? As new people come into our space and new allies come into our ecosystem. And then how are we doing that outside as well, right? Given the folks that we have on the table, the diversity of experiences. You know, Western University has this problem being a best kept secret. And we can't seem to get out of that. And it's hurting us.
Right.
It's a lot of it's humility, you know, and whatnot, but anyway.
That's an interesting, like that, the best kept secret. Like, yeah, we're doing all this great work and nobody knows. And it's, I feel like in this day and age, like you can, if you're not communicating, it's almost as if you might as well not be doing the work. Now, I don't actually believe that. Like, I've worked in programs, like sometimes like, look, do you want me to spend time on updating the Instagram page, or do you want me to like contact and serve this young person and family who's in desperate need? Like, no, skip the Instagram account. Nobody cares. But in this age of social media and so on and so forth, it's like, I actually believe that to communicate can actually amplify this and drive shifts and change. So we need to meet the needs of young people, but if we can also tell that story, we can do something to ensure that that situation doesn't get repeated, or at least is understood in some way.
And I think a lot of that is our responsibility too. You know, I am the YDC. There's a tendency, at least in my experience, to box people in, right, into a certain identity. You know, the individual mentality. But we're the YDC. There's 40-something people on this call on the retreat, right? Like all over the state. And I think we need to have our message down about, you know, we are the YDC.
Yeah.
Say that again, Jaime. Because there's this thing about the communication that I hear keep coming up. It's a little bit more in a priority 4, which we'll spend some time looking at, but it doesn't mean we can't just capture it now. It's just like interesting. I just hear the need to tell our story and communicate. Like I hear that both internally to the YDC so that we are clear about it, but also externally. Thanks, Ryan, for getting that.
If I could spell.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Does everybody have access, and does everybody see where we are, where Ryan's taking notes? And again, I'll say this. Oh, there you go, Jaime. Look at this stuff and try to digest it. Like I know it's a lot. So, and we have 3 more that we're gonna do.
Something the grant making star at the bottom is curious to me as both a demonstration of our walking, of our talking, and then also as a tool for community engagement and understanding. And this go round, I've had the opportunity to help my local community with the YDD grant making process. And it's been fascinating to watch my community colleagues engage with the distant reverence that they have for an ODE process. And then for me to have such an emotional and personal connection to this work. And I always, my MO is always to be to the personal and emotional connection. But how do we help both our grantees feel like they're part of the effort collectively, and then also be empowered by being part of that collective, and then also empowered to be advocates and acolytes for that work rather than passive state recipients of state funding.
Mm.
And maybe that's not our role, but that's what I believe is the power of being a grant maker or distributor. The power of what is often viewed as transactional actually can be something more.
Oh, like relational. That's, yeah, there's some, and you know, I've spent lots, this specific thing is a little more focused internally, like on some of our grant making and how do we, whatever the actions were. But Janine, that doesn't matter. What you're saying, I think, is true. And there's like I think priority 3 is more focused on like that grantee, I don't know, engagement, grantee experience. So, and I think there's work for us to, this is like continuously improve, right? Like you kind of never, it's not to say what we're doing is bad. It's just like we've got to engage and then it's like continuous feedback. Understand from grantees, be in relationships so that when they're like, yeah, this is shifting and changing, and maybe, you know, we want, like, bottom line for me on the grant making, like, it's like we kind of do as much as we can to get out of the way. Like, it's got to be, there's limited money and there are some restrictions. Jaime's point, though, is resonating from yesterday about like, even if we don't have the, like, let's not think totally from a position of deficit, but from abundance. So if we can, hey, YDD's got this, Ford family's got this, your local county has this, like, how do we just, like, we grantees are looking for support, like help in that regard, not just like a nope.
I wrote down grassroots feedback loop for continuous improvement.
That's good. I would note that for grant making, I think, Ryan, so that we know what that's relevant to.
Okay. And I will rephrase these. They're framed as questions right now just based on this conversation, but I'll end up reframing them to be more of statements in terms of a priority of things that you've listed out today. Yeah, it just keeps, there we go.
I hear this is a peach group. Is that right? Yeah.
Peach. This is Peach, and we're on this and we, trust me, people, we struggled. Like, should we, like, how do we, sometimes you start organizing stuff and then it gets a little hard to sift through. So we appreciate your sticking with us, but we try to organize these things based on comments over the last couple of days into these sections. So there's others, everything you're saying, like, I'm like, oh, yep, that's awesome. Yep. Oh, wait, I think that's up there. That's down here. Diana, do you have anything you want to put into the space?
Not for this space.
Yeah.
I think the whole like grant process and like funding and whatnot is still very new.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to like listen to what you all are saying and how you all have experienced it and whatnot. So it's coming together for me. Thank you.
Well, and there's some stuff, I can't remember where we're going next with Peach Group. We go to, I'll look down and I think we go to priority, we're on priority, then we go to priority 1. So I'll just give you a little preview, Diana, there's some of those youth engagement pieces that we've talked about come up, we felt like come up more in like priority 1 and maybe in a couple of earlier places. So some of the ideas that I've heard from the youth committee are in other places. But I think even here we've got this idea about making sure we, nothing about youth without youth. And so there's a strategy actually that's in this. It's a little lower down, Brian, from where you are right now, but that has some good youth related stuff. I'm telling you that to everybody, not to
Wait, I'm a little confused. So we're not going through all of the strategies under priority, like which priority are on 5?
We should be going through all of them.
We can go through all of them.
Oh,
Yeah, we have 5 minutes
okay.
to think about if there's any other additions, or if you look, as you guys look at those things, since you have the Google Doc, I mean, what's the priority? Like, okay, I would not think about all the different actions. That's like too confusing, but strengthen the council sense of purpose. The second one is intentional, nimble YDC committee structure. Third is nothing about youth without youth. 3 is equitable, inclusive. 4, like of those 4 things, like is there one that you're like, oh, that seems like really important? If they all seem of equal importance, then you should tell us that. But if y'all see something there that's like, we want to put lots of peaches by it, so to speak, now's the time.
Yeah, and also in terms of the priority number for these, we also should number these in terms of collectively what we think is a higher priority.
For me, a high priority is the nothing about youth without youth.
There you go. It's like, so Janine, should that be, Ryan, you might put that at the top of these notes.
Yeah, up here.
Yep. Yep, and just copy and paste it, or doesn't have to be the whole thing. It can just be the strategy.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find there it is right there.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Thank you, Ryan, for doing all this.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. The 2 that stood out to me is that one, and then just I scrolled down too much. The first, as far as strengthen council sense of purpose and role.
Oh, there you go.
Those 2 really stood out to me.
Ooh, put some lightning bolts by him. There you go, Ryan.
Yeah.
Love it.
I feel like how we focused on strengthening strengthening council sense. I feel like there's a lot of weight there, because when you create that and you create systems that invite people and welcome people in, then the other ones sort of fit in a bit easier or fall into place easier. And so I think that's why I'm like, when I hear you all, I'm like, oh yeah. And then it would allow, like, if there's clear systems, I think it allows youth to engage and actually engage, because then they'll kind of understand it, hopefully, if the systems, are there to, yeah, they better understand and then just engage from the get-go.
So Diana and team, and I see the strengthen council sense of purpose. Is that more of a priority than the nothing about youth without youth? And this is not a trick question. If you don't know the answer, don't worry about it. If they're of equal importance, maybe we just put 2 lightning bolts. But I really like what I heard you say, Diana, about like getting that council thing together. It may enable this nothing about youth without youth. That's what I heard you say, but you, please.
Yeah, more or less. But I think for me, the nothing about youth without youth would be take priority for me.
Thanks.
And then the strengthen council sense of purpose really kind of falls in line with, some of this stuff down here that we've written so far. So it just kind of backs it up in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, I think.
Nice, Ryan. I agree. I think I saw we had like a 5-minute warning.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
yeah. If I'm looking at the agenda, it's supposed to. Oh, it's not divided out in the agenda.
It's not. I've got it though, right? It'll do. We could probably. I'll look. I will tell y'all if I can figure it out. I've got more things open. You could probably, each of you probably start looking at what's the next rotation for this group. You could probably just start reading the first priority, unless you want to spend, there you go, move to your next priority. So next for this group is the first priority, which is like way at the top. So if you just want to spend some time while Ryan's cleaning stuff up, y'all can. Oh, and Lupe, I know you're out there. I don't know if you have any additions or questions. We don't want to forget you, ma'am.
Okay. So we're at priority number 1 next, right, Brian?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And people, like, spend a couple minutes. We have 20 total minutes, but like read through this stuff so that you can be familiar with it. And then maybe after a couple, 2 or 3 minutes, we can actually start talking about it. And now remember, sorry, you have, it's gonna be wild. You've got the notes in the column that the other group added, right? So you can read the left column for what is the original, like 1, 2, 3 strategies in 1 action. And then you have notes, Jared is still in there typing for kind of what they were thinking about. So I would try to read both. Oh my goodness. And they got questions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got all kinds of stuff in there.
How big of a staff are you gonna need for all this, Brian? I know you got the YDC, the council obviously gonna back you, but
Say that again, Jaime?
how big of a team are you gonna need?
I know. I got a report on COVID. I was like, oh my word. Yeah, I'm gonna need
the staff.
double the staff, please.
When I first started working for the agency as the compliance monitor was 2012. I was joined the Oregon Commission on Children's and Families back when that was still around, and there was about 50 people. There was 100 people 2 years before that, but 50 people in the office. And it's just amazing to me how much smaller we've grown, shrunk.
Wow, Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean those resources have come back to the community, right? Almost like, you know, we took one for the team, right, for the greater good. But No, and we need to be resourced adequately.
That's right. It's a lot of good work happening.
I have some stuff I want to add or kind of like talk out loud, just because I've had this in my mind. So yesterday I found or came across this one tweet and I liked it. We don't talk enough about how integration historically meant placing Black and brown people in white supremacist environments. That's still what diversity and inclusion means today. And so that reminded me of when I was working with youth in McLaren, and they would talk to me about their experiences, right? And they'd be like, well, this guard over here listens to these podcasts every morning that were very, very anti, like immigration, anti, like AOC and many of the topics that she's talking about, Green New Deal. And this is folks who are working with our youth at McLaren, right? And so it reminded me of that, where when you think about it, these systems are meant to rehabilitate folks. Like, and how I see that, I'm like, I shouldn't be scared to go into some place because it's meant for my greater good, but that's not the reality of it. And so when I see the topic of identify systemic problems, advance solutions, and support structural reform, I think of this larger picture of, like, the last sentence of that, it really hit me, like, what? That's still what diversity and inclusion means today. Like, we've just changed the wording, And so I don't know how that fits exactly, but those are my two thoughts on this.
Go, Diana.
Supporting a culture that strengthens youth success. I mean, because if you got security guards that are listening to podcasts about stuff like that, could have the effect of creating a poor cultural environment for some of
Yes.
And that's yeah.
So I don't know if we have like any sort of like autonomy over this or power or whatever. I don't know, but it's a larger issue. I would say, because I feel like a lot of the times I hear these conversations and we're very like focused on the youth, but not the folks around them and how those behaviors impact them.
Yeah. I think there's and Ryan, you can add this in our peach section. Like, there's some comments about the YDD, YDC being a champion for certain issues, where in this instance, Diana, like, we don't have actual authority, at least legal authority over OYA staff, but we can be a champion. That's just around these issues. Number two, there's this other role, which is just interesting for us to think about, which is YDD, YDC, like as an educator. And not, well, yeah, so how do you educate those, in this instance, OYA staff around these kind of issues? We currently don't have the staff capacities, the staff expertise to like go and teach classes on youth brain development or cultural identity and language, but that's an interest. Diana, it's come up before. It's come up in other conversations. Like, YDD staff could be an actual like teacher trainer. So I'll just stop there, Diana. Like, you're touching on something that others have wondered about, and I just wonder, Jaime, Janine, Adrian, like what you think about that concept.
It's actually, thank you, Diana. That was definitely very profound and needed, because it's actually expanded my thinking, because I think I mentioned it yesterday too, looking at the teachers. We don't have a pipeline of teachers, and that's a part of the systemic problem. I didn't even think about like McLaren and just that pipeline. Then it got me to thinking about the insurrection we just had and how many people that could be in McLaren, or, you know, FBI, that you have these unfortunate domestic terrorists that are part of our systems that are allowing it to happen. So how, you know, is there a role that we can play in that? And maybe even the council, you know, because again, I know there is the capacity issue with staffing, and there's only so much you can do, and you don't want to overload already a great staff doing wonderful things. But to me, a part of the system that's allowing this is the lack of people that's reflected of the students that they're serving, but then also, you know, those that are there and are going against what we're saying, we are anti-racist, but yet they're in a racist situation. So, yeah.
I look around and I say, is anybody doing this work right now? And if there were somebody that could do this work, who's closest to the table to get started? And sometimes I see us as an agency, although very small, we are doing work that in a lot of cases, some people aren't really even doing. And so how do we bolster that and strengthen it? You know, that's the question, right?
And related to that is, are people doing work that could be expanded to include filling some of these gaps? And I'm thinking about, Adrian, you're mentioning the teacher pipeline. There's a whole initiative happening in ODE regarding that. There's also initiatives happening within the Alaska Native American Indian Student Success Plan and the Black Student Success Plan. And how do we help how do we combine the efforts? And for example, in a situation like that, I'm also thinking about leveraging existing capacity in a lot of our education service districts, ESDs throughout the state, are doing work with their juvenile justice departments, and with alternative schools, for lack of a better word, and other areas. And how do we help? And they have nimbleness to provide capacity and dissemination and implementation supports. So is there an opportunity to tap into that? And to help educate them as educational leaders within their own communities, as well as perpetuate the mission that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Diana. You know, I having worked in McLaren too, and I've heard those sentiments by the youth, and I think about, you know, there's that community, right, and that's festering there. But you know, those folks are bringing that from other spaces too. So it's a bigger challenge, because we could train, right, folks, and you know, maybe even a department youth led, and people still go into their homes, into their communities. So going back to what is the landscape around this, right, and what's our role in it, whether that's OYA or whether that's another agency or any community. It's a culture problem, or maybe a culture opportunity, I guess, for transformation.
Yeah. There are psychologists and people that are renowned within the juvenile justice or psychological world in terms of the work being done on better brain health. And there's ones that are renowned specifically for their work in implicit biases and the psychological phenomenon that's born out of a lot of what we see today. And I've had conversations with Sanju more about this, but you know, it'd be really cool someday if, as we have, like we had that summit in 2019, I think, the youth summit. And then if we had some people come out and speak at those, but ways of educating people on the brain science and the brain development and real tangible methods for reducing and kind of pushing those implicit biases out of the way to get towards the greater success. And so, you know, that stuff, like, you know, to Brian's point, although we don't have the staff and the expertise available internally to carry out all this work, we're sort of a policy coordinating entity as well that can also rope in people and bring in outside organizations and entities and then develop frameworks for what we want to see as a vision.
Thanks, Ron. I saw Lupe jumped in there for a second. I don't know if he has something to add. Maybe not, because just appreciate the input.
Can I add a little more? So when I think of YDC and YDD, I came on board with Serena. I have spent a lot of time with like Janine and Serena and Anya and being loved and whatnot by them, and they're really awesome people and allowed me to feel comfortable in the space, take ownership, speak up and whatnot. And so when I think of YDC, I think of like embracing, acceptance, growth. And then when I think of our school system, especially Salem Kaiser school system, because I was part of the school system, I know folks still and whatnot, and you know, a lot of us share some very similar experiences. And I feel like the school system is the complete opposite of YDC and what YDC hopes to embody and whatnot. So it's cool to hear Janine and Ryan and Jaime talk about like the policy aspect and potentially pushing and whatnot. Because I think it also goes hand in hand with McLaren and what's happening there. It may not be in to the same degree, but it still really is affecting youth. I think of like pushing people out, pushing youth out when I think of the district.
Thanks, Diana. Yeah, all these resources, public education resources, pushing young people out. Mm. Mm.
I feel like I feel like that's my mission in life, is to figure out a solution to that, and I also feel like I'm getting away from our strategy assignment. But to me, that's the ultimately unclaimed space or gap in our state, is who's paying attention to what Diana just said. And I do a lot of work in education, and I think it's us. And so I want to claim it and run with it.
Great.
So I don't know if that's a strategy.
Yeah. I would say, I was trying to think of just the best way to word that. So.
I mean, that is. Yeah, I don't, Ron, I don't know if I can help you.
I got it. I'll get there.
Yeah, which is, I think that's at the core of what this priority is about. Identifying these problems and gaps, and then these strategies, and you know, the disparities, I think, are the way, or the place where in the data where this issue shows up. Now, it probably shows up in other places that aren't like all data, but you know, it's in real people's lives, Diana. I mean, right? Real, just in the feelings and stories. But the one place where we see, okay, young people, whether it's attendance or discipline or promotion from middle to high school or test scores, like we have all this information, and we can study all of that. Now, I'm not opposed to studying it. I know, I feel like we've studied, sometimes we just study, and then we don't actually do anything about it. So I'm not a fan of that. But we got to insert ourselves into those conversations, and it's long since, like, enough is enough. Like, and then so maybe it's this hold these systems accountable for disparities, right? So, okay, the data is telling us this, and now this is where it gets interesting, right? Is then when you hold folks accountable. If you don't close this gap, then you don't get X. Now, ODE, technically speaking, has the authority around that. YDD does not. And then you have like political and local control and blah, 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 blah. Excuses. But there's accountability. How do we hold accountable? And that's not, we probably haven't we haven't gotten much there. So.
Sorry, last question. Didn't we pass, I remember, I think I was like still in college, and we passed a bill around the entire state that I think it was like 2021 or 2020, where we had to implement ethnic studies across the entire, like every public school. And if they didn't implement it into their history or social studies curriculum, they could potentially like withhold funding from them, right?
Yes.
Remember that?
Yes. Yep. And that work is ongoing in ODE, where the challenge is implementation. So how do you you can write a beautiful plan, but then when you send it out to Roseburg High School, how does it get implemented? Not as an excuse, as an opportunity. That's also my life work. How do you get the beautiful reports to implement, to people to implement, so that the systems actually change?
We educate the youth. We tell the youth what we're doing for them, that this organization needs to do, and then we get them to help, because they'll push back. Yeah. I mean, hey, you're not doing this.
Ryan, that's it. Like the word that sometimes I've heard, but empower.
Yeah.
I like that word, but I don't like it because it's like, it sounds like youth don't have power. So, but inform and nurture within young people. Like, no, Diana, you, like you said, this thing was passed. Hey, middle schoolers, high schoolers, you should be advocating for this curriculum in your school.
Yeah.
Now that puts a lot of weight and onus on the young people.
They're the ones impacted. If it's not happening for them anyways, they're the ones that are being shorted by the system, you know, and And it's like we get into these conversations sometimes about rights where I've heard law enforcement and I've heard facilities talk as if they have this right to not disclose information, this right to perform their duties in a certain way. But does that infringe on the rights of the young person involved in the situation? And so, really, that might actually be helpful, giving them knowledge, maybe empowering them with knowledge about what their rights are, what improvements we're trying to make, and then, that way, I mean, it'd be like having little spies too, they call up the YDC or the YDD and say, hey, this organization's not following. It's, we need some consistency here. And so.
There you go, Ryan.
Yeah, just an idea.
Got it. So for our summit, our workshop that the youth council members are organizing, organize the youth, bring the youth, have them push back. Noted, Ryan. I'll take it back to Maricela.
I'll even come teach the youth about all their rights under the JJDPA and things law enforcement and other facilities can't do to them. I mean, I'm always just telling the facilities, but I'm not often telling kids what their rights are.
Well, that's like this. You said it, Diana. The summit that is actually for youth, not for brain develop. I mean, there's the brain development and all the disparity data and all that for the adults. But what about the youth summit? That's both about, hey, tell us your story and in a safe space and you're valued and appreciated, but also, here's those I don't know, rights or information that to create youth advocates. Interesting. I know we've been asked to move to the next priority. So just in the spirit of our time, I think we have 2 more to talk about. I don't know. I see Lupe's back in the mix, and we appreciate you. If you have anything to add, we don't want to miss it.
No, sorry, y'all. I just had to take a step out from the room. Just something that came up, but I'm just trying to catch up with the conversation.
All good. Okay, thanks, Ryan, for your continued note-taking. We didn't just, I'm gonna remind y'all, who's the reporter? I think this group, did y'all pick somebody to talk about the conversation?
Not that I know of. Who wants to volunteer? I'm the note taker. I can report out too, since I'll have everything right there in front of me if you want. I can volunteer that for you guys. Just let me know.
So Ryan.
Yeah.
There you go, Ryan. You got it. Ryan, you'll have to pick. You guys might want to spend a little time, because I think it's like, I can't remember. It's like 2 minutes. Like you're gonna have to pick the highlights from 4 different areas, like 1 or 2 ideas from one idea from the 4 areas or something like that. I don't know. I'm just telling you, it's not like you can go through the notes of everything.
So we're just, okay, so just so I'm clear, Brian. So there's the 5 priorities, right?
Yeah.
Each group is not going through all 5.
No, you're doing 4 of 5.
So we're just gonna, so we're basically, am I just picking one of the 2 or just doing the highlight reel of both? Whatever we want to say is the focus. Maybe is some nice.
I think it's up to the group, but yeah, like if you will have discussed 4 priorities, you could maybe pick 1 or 2 things out of the discussion and say, hey, this is an idea. Oh, this is an idea we feel strongly about. Does that make sense, Ryan?
Yeah.
But you could probably do it out of more than 1. You could probably do it out of 3, each priority, but it's like 1 or 2 ideas.
I already think I have a way of kind of framing this where it kind of captures sort of a theme of what we've been talking about, and that is that this group wants to see the YDC involved more as a policy coordinating entity in engaging with organizations in trying to find, you know, issues of equity or disparities or what have you, where, you know, they can set the priority and the precedent for what, you know, what we want to see in the state, and then getting youth involved in that effort, you know, so it's youth focused. And instead of it being about how much work can the YDC take on or the YDD take on, or how much extra funding can we get, what avenues of success can we find to bring together existing framework and infrastructure that's already out there in improving our work, you know? And so that's, is that sound right to you guys? Is there a better way you'd find of saying that? Sounds good. Okay.
Thanks, Ryan. I think now this group moves to priority 2.
Okay.
And you've got 20 minutes. And again, now you've got 2 groups that have processed through this.
Through this, yeah.
And I see some lightning bolts and I see some fruit next to some things. So
More policy work. Role
say again, Ryan?
right here, more policy work. Role needs to be bigger than funding.
So that's
kind of what we're.
Yeah, where is that? Is that under
Apple.
the Apple group?
Oh, that was
Yep.
For some reason I'm not seeing which.
So I'm under priority 2.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then under Apple at the bottom right here, where their lightning mark is. National Association memberships. Yeah, this is great stuff. Good. Okay.
nice. They even added develop policy agenda. Yay.
Yeah. I think that's great.
Yeah, yep. And that's one of that's there in the left-hand column too, kind of as like develop policy, legislative strategy, but we could have said agenda. That's good. More policy.
Yeah.
All right. So we're supposed to be halfway through the 3rd priority. Just tell me, I'm being the timekeeper.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. So I'm just reading through. These are really good.
This is the strategy in which, Diana, you made this point around OIA, and this is where some of the we wrote collaborate with partner stakeholders on trainings. Maybe that's not the right word. Anyway, identity, culture, language, bias, racism, DEI generally, and then noted some of the potential places where there are existing groups that are doing work to teach teachers, the Educator Advancement Council, the Teaching Standards Practices Commission, State Police Academy. Ryan, I can't remember if I wrote that correctly, but the training, isn't it like state police training or something? I can't remember the name of it. I don't know if you know, but
Department of Public Safety and Standards Training. So that's, they're just the academy. Yeah, you could just say academy works too.
Yeah.
I like that a lot of the conversations that have been happening between our group this morning thus far feel like it's been in preparation for this section. Because I think you guys are identifying gaps, you're identifying needs. there's a desire for the YDC to be engaged in more. And then when we come here, after we're trying to figure out how to finagle all that, I mean, everything that we've talked about so far is all right here. So now's the time to really kind of double down, I guess. Can I ask a question? As a staff member, I don't know the answer to this. When we're doing grants as a grant administering agency, is it a thing for us to set a policy precedent or policy priority and say, for grantees applying for funds in the funding categories, priority areas, this is what our focus is and what we want to see happen as like a general, and I probably already have that right now because I'm sure it's different for every grant type, but to say that, if our organization, finds that even in terms of negative things, if your organization does this or that, then we're going to want to have discussions about, further funding kind of thing. I don't know, sort of kind of using that money as this leveraging tool.
Well, Ryan, in the vein of, well, and YDC members, feel free to jump in, but, and youth committee, so on, you are like the next priority 3,
Okay.
is more about the grant making and ways to improve that. And as you saw yesterday or heard yesterday, the work that is happening around the request for applications is really trying to be clearer and more intentional about the kinds of things that we want our grantees to make happen. So that, I think that's starting. It's not to say that it didn't happen before, but I think we're just continuing to refine, and that continuous improvement of the grant making is about like becoming clearer and clearer about like, these are the outcomes. This is what we want. If you can't deliver on those things, that's not no harm, but this money may not be for you, kind of a deal. But aligning those things with our values and our and the challenges we see systemically. And then yes, there are things in grants like, yeah, there are mechanisms that we can pull when people aren't doing things the way that we want them to do. So
yeah, okay, great. Any thoughts from the members yet? Ooh, just had a new idea come in from the Lemon Group. They say policy legislative committee.
Yeah, so we can have the money to implement the ethnic studies bill, right? Among other things.
well, maybe the exercise here, and just because I think we're about to get kicked to the next, is like, are there things that you see here already that use the peach icon? Ryan could copy and paste it or something. Like, if you see that some of the stuff that's already written in this section that you're like, yep, that sounds good, we like that. If this idea down below, policy, legislative, strategy, is a priority, you put the peach by it or something, right? Like, or if the lightning bolt, you want to add another lightning bolt to more policy work, whatever, like, however y'all want to represent like a support for some of the ideas, that's totally encouraged, right? So I don't know if there's stuff that jumps out at people, but
If you guys don't mind, I was going to add a lightning bolt to this because I think that captures some of what we've discussed in the previous sections.
Where did you put it, Ryan? I don't know if folks saw it.
I put it right here next to collaborate with partners and stakeholders on training on identity, culture, language, bias, and
Cool.
race.
Maybe put the peach by that too, so they know which group put it there.
Okay.
I would also like to add peaches to the last part, the policy part.
Mm.
So I like those two, Ryan. The first one and then the policy one.
Which is this develop a policy legislative strategy, that one in that section, Diana, or is it in the narrow column like develop policy agenda? In it,
Actually, I think I was looking at the other group's notes. I
that's
lied.
fine. No, that's fine.
Because they did put that in.
We'll just drop a peach next to their lemon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's all good.
They'll be like,
We do not need to reinvent the wheel.
no.
That's totally fine.
All right. I think that, and this is just, I'm just throwing ideas out here, guys, kind of trying to help facilitate some of the conversations we've had. So not trying to make this my opinion at all. What do you think about the identity work and awareness raising of what the YDC YDD is, and identify where we intersect and how we can collaborate and expand and enhance? Because that does kind of get to that broader mission, being under-resourced with understaffed and trying to find where's more room to grow. What do you think? Okay, looks like we're moving over here in just a second.
But I like that, Ryan. We can add a peach next to it. I think it kind of like meshes everything else together.
Okay, great.
I love the fruit is, love it.
Yeah, just peppered all through.
Working. This is what we wanted. We wanted you to just use the fruit.
That's cool. I like this much better than writing. Just
Well, and that was going to be the challenge. Like that's why the first one was like hard, because you had to add and think and talk, and then once you got through the first, I think our hope was like, oh, now somebody's done some of the work. Now I can like rate it / prioritize it or something. So
it's cool. This was created from scratch, pretty much, just from talking.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's just good stuff. You guys want to move to the next one? Priority 3, give it a maybe read. You got to have a lot to read here. Now you don't have a lot of time. You got like 3 groups who've probably already looked at this. Grape, pear, and then apple. Yeah. So you're the last group, but if you want to read through it, I'm going to read through it, and then it's a conversation about where to add peaches or lightning bolts or both.
Here's a question for other groups from the Grape group that says, how else do we really lift youth-centered pathways and practices and affirm identity and safety?
Hey, Ryan. So you know how earlier you brought up like maybe withholding funding? So I brought that up actually one time during like a in-person meeting, and we were doing funding and stuff. We're like, how do we kind of hold folks accountable? And sorry, let me go to the question. And then, so I thought about it. I'm like, obviously, like internal dialogue. I was like, we can't really. I don't believe that we should and or can withhold funding from organizations who are already like underserved, underprivileged, and then they serve marginalized communities. However, I feel like that is also could be fairly easy to like manipulate with a lot of nonprofits who are already like disenfranchised. Oh, sorry, I got internet connection. Can you hear me? I keep getting these like internet connection is unstable.
You're okay.
So maybe it goes back to this, like we're not going to take funding away. Oh gosh, you all froze. Am I frozen?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
We can hear you. No.
Okay, sorry. So maybe like talking, right, and engaging with.
Oh, now you're gone.
Can you hear me?
No, it's going in and out. But
Okay.
go, Dinah. Dinah, also maybe turn off your camera and see if it's a little better.
True. It's slow. Okay, but maybe like, you know, having conversations with programs, and then bringing in the youth that they serve in their communities, and like, hey, what's working, what's not, you know, is the work that you all are doing aligning with our mission and what we want to see happen? And if not, like engaging those youth and getting their feedback.
Mm. Thank you, Dana. I you know, I don't
Especially,
go.
as I say, especially now, there's a lot, like I'm on TikTok and I sometimes feel disconnected from some of the youth because they're a lot younger and things are changing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just very important to bring in the youth, especially like middle schoolers, and really hear their feedback and what's working for them now.
Mm. Dinah, appreciate that. This is, I think, a really important question and point you're making about, and tell me if you're missing it, but like, how do we have our grantees be committed to youth voice and feedback? So, because like we're a step removed, we're here, YDC, YDD at the state. We make a grant. You say you're going to do these things, and we're like, okay, and then write us a report. And then the grantees are like doing hard. It's COVID. It's great. It's hard. It's difficult. And we ask ourselves, and Lupe, I see you shaking your head. Like, it's interesting. Like, should we have requirement? Like, no, you need to. Your organization should have a youth leadership council. I'm making that name up. That gives you regular input and feedback, so that you know what's working. And if you don't, well, you can't get our money. I'm making that up, but that's not right. But how do you we all know there's some small organizations, like literally mom and pop shops, that like have 1 or 2 staff and a dozen volunteers delivering food and delivering services. And then we're like, no, you need to have a youth council. Like, we don't have the resources to do a youth. And then you want us to do a survey of youth. And then, so it's a fascinating like tension. Like, but how do we hold organizations accountable? I'm super interested and super like, or how do we provide resource as a YDC?
Something I've seen with other funders is the use of optional questions. Now, I mean, obviously people's capacity can impact if they're able to provide on those optional questions. But, you know, I just thinking back about the questions of the applications, and can't remember if I saw something about, you know, how are youth voices part of your you know, planning and development, decision making. And I don't know if it's optional, you know, if it's required, but I think, you know, going back to the solution is with the youth. We're just investing in their solutions.
Right. One example of that from a public agency was the student's investment account that ODE has been doing for the last year and a half. And they have a community engagement component, which was pretty loose the first year. The second year, it's tightening up. They also offered so it allowed the districts to journey into it, which it was very hard for them to do. And then they offered a toolkit of just really pretty basic examples that first year, and then are layering in different components of support to make sure that they do that. It's a different population as school districts, but it's very normal in the world of philanthropy to put requirements like that within grant applications.
Can you talk more about that, Diana?
Diana, we've seen your comment.
Yes. Hey, so on that note, yeah, I just wanted to talk about why I believe it's important to like engage with the programs and the participants, the grantees, because I've seen grants that have like, you know, 80% of our students will go on to pursue a higher education, will go on to college. Like this percentage will graduate, this percentage, and it's numbers and things that we can't control. I can't control who's gonna go on and pursue a higher education now. I can't guarantee someone's gonna have perfect attendance and then, you know, be able to graduate or complete their homework. I don't know. So, and when I read that, I was like, how did anyone even approve a grant? Like some of these are very unobtainable or like not measurable. So I just think it's important to have conversations with the grantees to then help them ensure that they're able to carry out their goals and have measurable goals, you know? And I think that takes, because like you all are mentioning, and we know nonprofits are overworked. And so I think us engaging would also help alleviate some of that work, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
This is super. Thanks, Diana. Like, I can't unravel this quickly, but I think that organizations, nonprofits in particular, but they will write in a grant application things that they're trying to attain and or achieve. Now, sometimes they are achievable, or sometimes they just like the graduation rate of their young people they serve. Like it may be like maybe I'll make it. I worked at a nonprofit, and we talked about graduation rate of the students we served, and I was like, why are we talking about graduate? Like we're running camps and after school programs. I'm like, these things that we're doing have not very much relationship to this person graduating. They kind of relate, but they don't really. Like if a kid feels comfortable in school, and then so I was like, we should actually put out and assess the things that that actually make sense. We are helping build kids' confidence and future thinking. Like, social emotional things. Like that is actually what we can with honesty, fidelity, to use the like with real truth. That's what we can tell you we're doing. And then we can say, hey, somebody else, some smart person at the university so-and-so did a study and said that when you do these things, young people are more likely to stay in school and to graduate. So I'm just like, I'm not interested in graduation, not because I don't believe in school, but because I just, if I wanted the kids to graduate, I'd be working on credit attainment and tutoring and like things that actually help young people. So we got to like let go of some of those data points. As I say, Lupe, like he probably can say this better than I can. Like those aren't the things that we have control over. What is our sphere of influence? And then how do we partner with nonprofits to assess the things that make sense for their goals and their work, and then partner with this education. And Brian, I'm just going crazy now. So it has a lot of unintended consequences, all of this focus on these things, and then the need to put them in grant applications where you're like, that's not real. So assessment, evaluation, I don't know how to cap it off. Those are things we've got to look at, I think, more closely so that we can be realistic. Or not even realistic, just like strength-based and meaningful. And then that's nothing to say of the qualitative story of like a young person who Jaime gave us 2 stories. I know Adrian's got a story that I hope she'll put into the space at some point. Like, we want to make lifelong learners and community members. And yes, if you graduate from high school, that's great, because I know statistically that's going to allow you to earn, but it's bigger than that. Okay, I'll be quiet now.
It is bigger than that. Yeah, and I think a lot of people just get really hung up on the language of applying for a grant and trying to illustrate with some level of confidence that they have the ability to provide these metrics, you know, and sometimes people forget what the real goal is. You know, if the goal is to just maintain your funding by trying to produce some, you know, statistically relevant, you know, outcomes in your reporting, that's fine. But it also, you know, you could have, all your youth could be significantly depressed and dealing with, you know, other suicidal issues or other social challenges, you know, while, as long as they're engaged with this program, you know, their graduation rates are improving ever so slightly, you know, but it still doesn't actually get at what we need to be able to do for that youth to create a more healthy, sustaining environment for them. So, you know, yeah, I like it. It's great.
Yeah, it's sort of a, you know, culture of production versus a culture of relationships.
There you go, Jaime.
And I mean, I think that, at least in my experience, right, is writing a lot of grants. Our grant application is simple compared to some of the other ones I've seen, and it does have a kind of a good balance of qualitative and quantitative questions. Not to say that there is an improvement, right? There always is, but it is, you know, I think there's like 3-4 questions, right? And you all actually, we can put a link, and you could, there's your, you know, reduced lunch and all that. It just facilitates things quite a bit. And I mean, I think the fact that we've also like have focused where the dollar should be going, right? That's helped, because it's very clear like where the dollars need to go. There's a lot of folks that are still not on that, you know, still in the philanthropy world, still very confused.
I remember one of our in-person meetings, we talked about the whole grant writing process and whatnot. And actually it was probably the small strategic groups. And I remember, I think it was Anya maybe, and they're just talking about how a lot of folks are worried about the funding, right? So they want to like overshare, overcompensate. So I think building relationships, developing those, avenues of communication with programs and grantees will allow for that, perhaps like not being as scared and being, you know, more open and upfront with us about their needs as well, and like their struggles. It reminds me of what Jaime said yesterday, where the scarcity mindset, and I think because grants seem competitive, reminds me of like scholarships. You have to give your like sob story, all your trauma, for you to hopefully, you know, get some dollars.
Brian, or even others that are on the council, have we ever partnered with, say, Meyer or OCF or other funders to do like a grant writing workshop or something where we are connecting and collaborating with them, but then bringing the grantees together?
I'm not aware of, not in my tenure. I don't know, Janine, Jaime, others, like, I think we've had conversations, relationship, but a grantee, that's an action. Somebody run and grab it. Grantee grant writing workshop.
And now we can do it virtually.
I'm
So
sure this exists, and we
I mean, I would go one step before that, is like, let's break bread.
yeah,
For you know, what are you people
Like that.
doing?
I like that.
And we do that. Was 20 seconds. I just did one example. Abraham and I had a conversation with some folks who do gang intervention and prevention work, small local nonprofits, and we just broke. It was Zoom, but we were just building relationship. 4 seconds. Thank you all.
Some great conversation.
Awesome. Look at all this. This is great.
We're back.
It worked.
Worked. Melissa, I think we should give Melissa and Lindsay like a huge round of applause.
Here, definitely. They're awesome.
Thank you both. I can't believe it. So I think, Melissa, and maybe it's a 5-minute break, not a 10-minute break, because we're a little over time. You know, I'm just cutting out the breaks. But I think we have for those, whatever you want to call it, bio break, water in, water out, whatever we want to call it. Oh, Celeste is do you want to say goodbye, Celeste, and then we'll have a little break? Or you just wave?
Bye, Celeste.
All right, so we'll come back at 3:05, and then Karen, we're going to hand it back to you to kind of do a little bit of reporting out, and I think each group should be thinking about who the reporter is, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, do I get a break since I was late?
Everyone gets a break. Thanks.
Hey, no, you need to stay on. We have a special assignment for you. I'm kidding.
I'll stay on, Jaime, if you are reading another story.
I think somebody else got another one around here. So. Thank you.
All right. Coming back. Karen, do you want to
Yes.
lead us in the report out process?
I would be delighted to. So one thing that I think our group had trouble with was the actual prioritization piece of it. It just was really tough. So I am going to leave it to Cords because he was the note taker for our group to talk about the themes and some of the key points, things that were brought up from us. I think we have essentially about 5 minutes per group. If you did not decide on someone to report out, feel free to fast and furiously chat amongst yourselves to designate someone. So I'm going to turn it over to Cord for our group, and we were the grape group.
Hi, sorry, I'm just getting unmuted here. All right. So I sorry, I had to step away for a second. Are we the first ones to go here?
Sorry, I volunteered you without knowing that you were back. I apologize. Yes.
Oh, sorry. No, I just got delayed. But I will go ahead and start off with. So we started, I believe, our first one was priority 3. Is that right?
I think so. Yes.
And just to let people know, I think you literally have somebody, Melissa, like 2 minutes. So
yeah.
So I'll just kind of pick a highlight from each of these, maybe just to mention some things that jumped out from each conversation. In this one, a couple of things. I mean, one was incorporating, the adolescent brain development within that sort of spread of creative and culturally based programming priority. And there was just a question for the other groups, like how else can we really lift youth-centered pathways and practices that affirm identity and safety? We felt like there was possibly more that we could do in that area of this particular priority. In priority 4, I think that we co-signed the starting the strategic planning implementation as being a great first step. But one thing that we wanted to note was that we think that linking the strategic and authentic relationships with sovereign governments and other agencies is an important part of that implementation, and really seeing implementation as work that is done in partnership and not just by the council and agency. I will jump down to priority 5. This one is so rich. There were so many things. We added a whole bunch of actions. We had a lot of questions. There's a lot of conversation about just how we can do more to really strengthen and empower the youth council members and really elevate the council training for the entire council by making the process and training better for youth members, that ultimately everything we do that improves accessibility benefits the entire council membership. And then I will hop back up to priority 1. We ended up having just a lot of conversation around priority 1, but I think that we did like, there was a comment that another group made around creating conditions for grantees and funding priorities that are designed to hold folks accountable for disparate issues. That was just an interesting concept. I think that it's worth thinking about what accountability looks like within the frame of all the things that we've discussed here as part of this planning. And I'll keep it brief and stop there.
So after the grape group was the pear group. Is the pear group ready to go?
This is Eric. I'm going to defer to Anya or Molly or whomever has access, or Sanji, whoever has access to the notes. I would just say our pair group was awesome, and it was delightful to have the opportunity to talk through some of the priority language. I would say from my perspective, the overarching theme in all the areas was just how important it is to reaffirm, reassess our equity lens and make sure that equity and honoring identity and holding safety kind of our youth as primary focus needs to influence all of our work. So I'll let someone who's got the notes in front of them bring those up, but that's those are our overarching comments.
I don't have the notes, Molly. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but you are the one in charge with the notes and the powers, the superwoman's powers.
Yoda. Thanks. Yeah, so I think Eric summed up that main point that came up in every area that we were talking about. I think another area that we spend a lot of time thinking about in terms of priority 2, when we're talking about promoting policies and partnerships that expand and leverage resources. We talked a lot about adding a strategy or theme with engaging other CBOs, other nonprofits, and making sure that when we're talking about sovereign nations and other state agencies, that we're including local agencies, county, community colleges, etc. So that was kind of another theme that we are also looking at, kind of raising questions where that link with post-secondary is coming up throughout these conversations. I'd say that was the second theme that came up a few times. And I'm just checking real quick here. We ended talking, so beyond that real prioritization of resources based on an equity lens, we ended up talking a lot at the end about, let me get down to that note, 1 second. The idea of the YDD as the go-to to what? And so in terms of looking at communicating that awareness of the organization and really what we're about, to make that clear when people are interacting with our group. And I will end on do no harm. So we spend a lot of time talking about trauma from within the juvenile system, and that needs to be a part of the conversation as well. Did anybody else want to add anything that we missed?
You're muted, Judge. I don't know if you're talking.
Judge Abernathy, I believe you're muted if you're talking.
I'm sorry, I said that all muted. We said we wanted to prioritize explicitly in the action strategies BIPOC youth and LGBTQ youth within the rubric of under the rubric of safety, and that they were and actually girls as well, under the rubric of safety, to prioritize those groups.
Thank you for that. Okay, so now we have the Apple group.
Okay.
We also asked staff to summarize for us, so Jared is going to do that because I have no notes in front of me. We lost one of our members already, so I'm sorry that we won't be able to include Celeste's voice directly, but I just want to say one thing, Jared, before you jump in, and that consistently throughout all of our review, we had a really tough time prioritizing also. We didn't do that very well. But consistently, the theme that came up was that we need to be clear about what we're the go-to agency for, and that we need to have 2 or 3 top themes and values that we promote rather than trying to spread ourselves too thin, because goodness knows there's far too much work to do. So Jared, with that.
Great, thank you. So starting at the top with priority 1, again, echoing a lot of the themes that we're hearing so far, we put a lightning bolt on this one next to commissioning a study or white paper. There was a lot of discussion at this point about really understanding the data, having a really good picture of what the disparities are, and especially how COVID is going to impact our grantees and youth across the state. So really emphasizing data and finding ways to access that data so we can make informed decisions. Priority number 2. This one, we talked a lot about how our role at YDD needs to be bigger than just funding, and actually diving really into policy work as well. Developing a policy agenda and really kind of finding those few things that we want to emphasize and be the experts in, so that we can, in addition to funding, just be those policy experts. And let's see, again, lots of talking about intersections between different agencies and federal funding as well, trying to leverage that in addition to just resources in Oregon. Priority 3. Excuse me while I scroll. This was, again, like we talked about, really defining our role and understanding our lane, because there's so much, you know, really picking things that we want to do well. And also a big theme here was evaluation, making sure that that programs understand how we're evaluating them, really maybe identifying some core principles and giving grantees tools to be able to evaluate themselves and know how we're evaluating them. And again, that goes back to the data conversation and metrics. And then priority 4, we talked about determining areas where we would like to be kind of aggressively ambitious. So again, choosing those key points that we really want to hone in on. And I think that covers the main points. Anybody else have anything to add?
I would like to add just one thing that Celeste brought up. One of the key elements that she mentioned as a potential metric and as something we should be striving for is the notion of youth belonging, and that with a sense of belonging comes in, it represents network, it represents connectivity, and all of those things that we're trying to get to. And she would like to see us dig into that a little bit further. She says there's some great research going on, and provided us with a link to a reference. So that's something that we might take a look at and could be an organizing element.
Thank you for that. And we are now at the peach group. I hope everything was peachy.
Everything was peachy. Absolutely. Thanks, Karen. So it was a pretty good discussion. I think it was mostly at the 30,000 foot level. So imagine most of yours were. I'm just going to take the probably full 2 minutes to kind of dive in a little bit. So some of the focus of the group was mainly about process and what we can do to improve on really making those youth voices heard, being that advocate for those youth. And then also, what is YDC's story? I think a lot of people are really looking for, what is that narrative? What is that focus? What is that principal directive? What are we about? And so we're wanting to build on that a little bit more. In terms of priority 2, the focus is we're identify on work and awareness of raising of what the YDC and YDD is, and identify where we intersect and how we can collaborate and expand and enhance. Those are all key words I keep hearing. Collaborate with partners and stakeholders on trainings, identity, culture, language, bias, racism. For priority 3, it was continuously improving grant-making process. How do we make grantees be committed to youth voice and feedback? Can we make a youth-led, grassroots-based feedback loop required for organizations receiving funds, so we always know what how those youth are doing, what they think about the funding and programming? How can we create an environment where grantees feel safe in communicating their struggles and challenges and serving youth without jeopardizing funding? And then for priority 4, it was strengthen council's sense of purpose and role, sustain its collective wisdom and knowledge, make it more youth focused, nothing about youth without youth, develop pathway for council members to engage with staff and learn more about the work. And then we really liked the comment from, I think it was Great Group, Jared, develop a policy legislative strategy, the policy agenda. That was something that our group liked a lot too. If anybody else has anything to add for our group, for Peach, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I think I may have captured it, hopefully. Okay.
I see a thumbs up there, so we will move on. And I am certain that the lemon group made lemonade.
Oh, you took it from me.
Oh, sorry. It was too obvious.
Yes. So yeah, I'll kind of speak broadly about some of the themes we talked about. Again, kind of what's been mentioned before. We talked about equity and the idea around inclusivity, right? And one of someone we talked about is kind of parents, right? And serving our youth and what role are they playing, right? Within their voice being heard and being included in kind of our policies. I understand we as council members almost have parents, but being a parent, some of the organizations are being served, right? The youth, so hearing from them and their what their voice has to say, right? And part of that also kind of segues into kind of communications, internal and external communications, and how we're again kind of telling the YDD or YDC story. But then again, also how we communicate internally between council, staff, and what we're trying to get across, which also kind of led into this other conversation, right? Again, about what role the council can play legislatively as advocates, right? That was also something that was brought up. And how do we do that? That's something that wanted to be explored further. Again, kind of with looking at data disparities and prioritizing our resources where we see those is another area that we really talked about. And that's kind of what I recall mostly from the discussions we've had that kind of stick out. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Prasa.
I thought that was really great, Abe. And the other thing I would add is when we're thinking about engaging more youth on the council and on the committees, we talked about what can we do more to remove barriers for youth accessing the different opportunities and provide them with support, because there is an opportunity cost at times when you want to be able to dedicate your time on the council and on the different committees. So what are we doing to help alleviate some of those opportunity costs, whether it's through a stipend or other professional development and supports? So that's something we talked about as well. And just again, going back to our equity lens and process being the foundation of all of our work and ensuring that it permeates through the plan and the actions that we take. Because that was key to what Abe had mentioned in terms of who we're missing at the table, who do we need to engage even further, and then all the way down to some of our very basic process pieces. So that's what I would also add to what Abe had shared. Thank you so much, Abe, for representing our group.
No problem. Thank you, President.
That was absolutely wonderful. We do have, I think, a few moments. If anybody wanted to add anything as far as the themes go for the report backs, I will shut up for a second and feel free to unmute, and then we can go on to the next thing.
This is Eric. I'll just reflect that we're talking about some very important things and very exciting work that goes beyond just making grants. So obviously that's a duh statement, but that gets me energized as a council member to be part of the capital W work. So thank you.
And I think that's a nice segue. So this time that we've set aside is really to reflect on the 3 days, what we've heard, what we've been thinking, what actions we want to take, sort of next steps from here. And for me, one takeaway that I have kind of mentally is so much of what we are dealing with is systemic failure in other places. And that's why there's so much connectivity between the YDD, YDC, and all of the other entities. And those systemic failures should not ever lead us to think that the youth that we serve have failed. We have failed them in some big ways. And having their voices come in and making sure that they are represented was something that I really took away from one of the earlier days that we've had. Other takeaways, reflections?
If I may add, just, our scope is large. It's very broad, on one side dealing with grants over there, now talking about the big W for work and policy. But let's not forget that the other side of our house is juvenile crime prevention, Fourth Amendment jurisprudence and services related to that. So there is quite, from one end of the spectrum to the other in terms of our focus, where we could identify priorities. So I just wanted to put that out there too. So.
Can I make a point? I like what Ryan just said, and I would add this caveat that, and I know there's no panacea, but the goal could be, or could be, if we really can be effective, we can actually mitigate the amount of work and resources needed to be directed toward juvenile justice, right? I mean, to me, it's a sort of measurement, and I know that, again, there's no panacea and there's no 100%, but we definitely should be able to mitigate that in ways in which some of the stuff that we do in those spaces, those resources that are placed on the other side, really have the intended proactive impact instead of reacting and trying to fill deficiencies that got missed because we didn't, and some of these things are out of our control, right? Because there's so many polities that impact what happens to young people that lead to some of these dynamics. But I just wanted to sort of say I'm hearing you, and then just adding that caveat to how we think.
Thanks to be.
I didn't intend to create silence. I was hoping.
It's okay. I have learned to give a moment for the introverts, mainly because I know that in the breakout groups, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of information. So I'm just hoping that if there is an introvert or somebody who's a little shyer, wants to speak up, to give them the space to do so.
So the next step is just us becoming a bigger agency, right? Getting more funding.
Yes, global world domination has always been the strategy. Yes.
That's not supposed to say the quiet part out loud. That's...
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay, so let's move on to next steps. And and some of this we're just going to have to sort of talk through, Brian, I think in front of everybody. What I'm feeling like is that we probably need to take all of the notes, mesh them together, put them into some sort of an order, and then figure out whether we need to bring the full committee back for more discussion, or just the strategic planning committee, one, or both, and to do that piece of it.
I think that sounds right. I think, yeah, we'll need to, yeah, bring the stuff into the workshop and start making some toys, and then come back. I think you said it, to the strategic planning committee probably initially, and then we have our March meeting, March 18th, if I'm not mistaken. I think as a committee, we should talk about like what we want to deliver then. I hear loud and clear today, and I believe I kind of have thought this throughout, that since this is an evolving process, it's not like we're going to bring you a finalized plan in March. I think we can bring you the next piece, the next product, and we want a living, breathing plan to a great extent. But again, I know we want to like be able to like hit a milestone. So so we should do some conversation again among that committee, maybe even to the smaller, like Heidi, Karen, and a few of us will sort of get our heads together. Then we'll get the strategic planning committee together. We'll come back to you in March and say kind of here's where we're at. And then this has been super helpful and valuable. So.
And do we have a strategic planning committee meeting on the books, Melissa?
I don't think that we do. I will check our records to see if there was one scheduled before
I have a feeling we don't, so we may have to have an impromptu one between now and the 18th. Yeah. Just a heads up for the strategic planning committee members.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's going to happen. So I think, Brian, with that, we can probably give folks some time back in their day.
I think we may be able to do that. What a wonderful thing. Now, I know that, where's Adrian? She's somewhere on here. Adrian and I have been going back and forth, have appreciated Jaime's stories. I don't know, Adrian had a story that we were talking about her sharing. Adrian, can I put you on the spot?
Sure, why not? I can't be invisible here. No, definitely Jaime have enjoyed your stories. Was hoping Brian would ask you instead of me, but he didn't. And so, and also actually being in Andy's session yesterday and just hearing him talk about what he's doing with Warm Springs, like I want to hear those stories. I want to visit once we can be in person. The story I have, it just really, it's one where, I don't know if you've heard of the program called Girl Strength, but there is a program for girls and women. It's a violence against women prevention curriculum. And I actually became a Girl Strength instructor because what I saw is like, wow, you're teaching these girls that they have value and they can fight for themselves. They can protect themselves. Oftentimes we see in movies and everything, like all of a sudden, woo, someone's after me and ooh, I can't defend myself. And so with this program, and it's through the Portland Police Bureau, they get volunteers, they train us to teach these girls. And one incident stood out to me because you're there in the moment with that youth and you're hoping the curriculum you're taking them through really makes an impact, not just in the class, but afterwards. And there's one activity that we lead the girls through. It's called Define and Tell. And so basically, if someone is doing something you don't like, whether it's a friend hugging you because you don't like hugs, like how do you tell them and it not be awkward, to a teacher doing something inappropriate, or someone that's after you that has ill will, how do you use your voice and tell them? And so basically, it's if something is happening, it's like define what it is. So what it is that they're doing that you don't like, tell them why, and then tell them the next action. Well, obviously, depending on who it is, you may be nice with your friend, not nice with the perpetrator. So we have them doing all those different activities. And obviously, to talk them through it, yeah, it's going to go in an ear, out an ear. So we have them practice it. And I was at the Montevilla Community Center right on 82nd and Gleason, where some stuff does happen. And one of the young ladies, we were leading them through the activity, and we said, we're going to emulate it. So one of the girls, I wanted her to practice it with me. And as soon as she started, she looked down, and I said, look me in the eye. And so she looked me in the eye, and I can tell you, it was one of those like, wow, she had so much more confidence when she did that one little gesture. And then she went through the activity. But the more impactful part of the story to me is, so I went off and I was listening to the other, girls do this activity. And all of a sudden, the girl that I had paired her up with, I hear the youth saying to her, look me in my eye. I was like, what? Wow. I had that youth say it to this girl. So she got to practice it, not just from an adult, but from another youth. And how much confidence comes in that. So for me, where I look at the work I do, and it's, sex trafficking and exploitation, and how I know that there are pimps that will go into malls and they will test out girls. They'll go to them and possibly say, oh, you have pretty eyes. And the girl that looks him in the eye and says, thank you, he's like, not gonna worry with her. She has confidence. But the girl that looks down and says, thank you, that's the target. So, to me, the work that we are doing, and giving grants to these youth serving organizations, and the work that you all staff are doing to help us get this money out to them, it is hugely critical for us to prevent some of these things from happening. This lifetime of trauma, going into the juvenile justice system, just as what has been previously mentioned. So I just appreciate the work that the staff is doing and that we are all doing as a community, as a family. Jaime had mentioned, we were talking about grants and, training the grantees. It was like, can we break bread first? It's like how we are coming together as a family, as a community to be better for our kids, because we have felt them. The system has felt them. So how can we do that? And so, yeah, that's the story I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Really, really appreciate it. Yeah, and I think for me as let me try to hold it together. Yeah, as the director, but I mean, I'm here to serve. We will always make space for those stories and for those relationship moments, right? Because we need to be connected ourselves, even if it's in this virtual, some kind of antiseptic world. We'll be back together, but we can always make space for each other, because then that'll enable us, I think, to make the spaces that our youth so desperately need, crave, and know actually how to create themselves. We just kind of need to get out of the way sometimes, and sometimes they need a little help, a little direction, and that reminder to look up. So. Thank you all. I don't know. I know Celeste is not here, and I think somehow by some rule or something, a council member needs to actually adjourn us. So
I will gladly give people time back. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.